everybody. Welcome to the show. Around the Nation right here at EST Nation. Got Waldorf. Got a great show for you guys today. Big stories, lots of stuff. We got WikiLeaks, the WikiLeaks story I promised you guys yesterday. We've got more news on the Obamacare replacement bill. Kellyanne Conway, she's made a return. She's back. Yay for Kellyanne. I cannot wait to do this story. This is fun. Then we got Bernie Sanders responding to some criticism from a writer on the Washington Post. That's good. That's a good story. It's actually probably one of the better ones that I have today, or at least one of my personal favorites, other than Kellyanne, of course. And then Americans are now fucking less. Why? We'll get into it. They actually took a look at a study and was like, you know, Americans are fucking less. That is a problem. That is a huge problem. Huge. So we've got those stories. So we're going to have fun today. It's going to be a good show. Stick around for the next hour as I go around the nation. Some of the best stories and progressive political commentary from here, from on the web, and around the nation. Now, before I get into the stories, I want to thank everybody for, of course, watching and tuning in. And I want to wish all the women a happy International Women's Day. Hey, it's International Women's Day. Also, around the nation, there are women, and I understand that this is more of a privileged position for a lot of women that have decided to take the day off, to take part in Day Without a Woman. I think, like I said, for the women who are able to take that day off, who are in that privileged position, that's great. And for the women who are not, just remember that everybody is fighting so that you will be able to, that you are appreciated and respected for being able to do what you do. So, and that's your message from this pasty white man. Anyway, I'm a little pasty. I don't see a lot of sun. I'm here in the office all the time. That's why. So anyway, thanks to the patrons. Thanks to everybody watching at home. Of course, please like and share this video, this stream, so that more people can watch, and a bigger audience is always better. So thank you to those who do that. I appreciate it. And of course, to those who continue to fund the show through your donations. If you want to be a patron, patreon.com/TYTNation. Because you help keep us independent and corporate sponsor free. So, that said, let's roll into the first story. Let's talk about Vault 7, WikiLeaks, and get into it. Because this is some scary stuff. So we'll start out with scaring the crap out of you, and then we'll go into something fun. Now, yesterday, WikiLeaks released a trove of documents, reportedly from the CIA, that details some of the tools that they use to hack into certain devices and applications. Now, they hack into these, of course, to be able to use to basically spy on people. Okay, so these are spy programs that are going on. Now, some of the devices they can hack into that are detailed in the WikiLeaks documents include things like phones, tablets, smart TVs, and communications apps. So there's several different things that they can get into. And I'm going to break it down. One of the programs that's actually detailed in this document dump is actually called Weeping Angel. Oh boy, that's not scary sounding at all. WikiLeaks writes basically they break down how this works. After infestation, Weeping Angel essentially places the target TV in a fake off mode. So basically, you think you turn it off, it's not actually off. The owner believes that it's off, and it looks like it's off. However, while it's in this fake off mode, the TV actually operates as a bug, recording your conversations and then sending them over the internet to a covert CIA server. You know, this whole thing, this is like the old Soviet jokes, right? In America, TV watches you. Or at least in this case, it literally listens to you and sends it to the CIA. So you can't even have a conversation in front of your smart TV. You can have a conversation in front of any sort of recording device, whether it be a microphone or a camera. unless you want the CIA to be able to see it. Scary stuff, right? Now there's more, and this actually comes from the Washington Post. By targeting devices, the CIA reportedly gains access to even well-encrypted communications, such as popular apps as Signal and WhatsApp, without actually have to crack the encryption itself. So that's an important point to note. They can get access to these accounts, but it's not by breaking the encryption codes. So if you use things like WhatsApp and Signal, those are actually still very secure unless you're being targeted by the CIA. Now they look at this and they're like, well, we can't get through the encryption. Why don't we just hack the device itself and then use your credentials to log in and see all your data? That's exactly what this whole thing is. So they found different ways, according to the Post, to bypass these, according to WikiLeaks, to bypass these encryptions. As WikiLeaks notes, the government hackers can penetrate both Android phones and Apple phones, Apple technology, and collect audio and message traffic before this encryption is even applied. So basically, they take control of these devices, they access those apps as if it's their own phone to get your texts and your recordings. They don't need to break that encryption, they can just log in. Now, since they can, of course, hack your phone, they can also send users geolocation, audio, and text, and covertly activate the camera and microphone inside of the phone device itself. So now they do this, of course, by sending in malware to infect those phones and devices. Now they also use malware to infect operating systems like Windows, Mac, OS X, Solaris, Linux, and others. So look, it doesn't matter what you use, the CIA is coming for you either way. If you're on their shit list, here they come. They're coming for your device, and they're going to take it over, and they're going to listen to you. Now, also, there are different programs that are put in here that can just generally wreak havoc. For example, one of them is called Wrecking Crew. And basically, it's a way to crash people's computers. Another one tells you how to steal passwords using the autocomplete function on Internet Explorer. This is all within the WikiLeaks document dump. There are also router exploits in these. And the CIA, of course, collected attack techniques from malware produced in other states. Now, this is very important, including Russia via a project called Umbrage. So, okay, so they can look at the different types of attacks different countries use, right? They can essentially lift the fingerprint off these attacks. Well, that's interesting. Why would that be? Why would they want to know that? Why would they want to see that? Well, of course, there's identification purposes, right? So you can see who attacked. Also, theoretically, it could also be used to leave behind the same fingerprints to misdirect attribution for cyber attacks. Basically making it look like somebody else did it, even though the CIA were the ones that hacked this device. Fascinating. I wonder where that could be useful. Now, probably the most frightening piece of information within this document dump so far is that the CIA had reportedly studied whether or not it could infect vehicle control systems for cars and trucks. Very, very scary stuff. Now, imagine if they could take control of your car. They could obviously track where you're going through the online, through the GPS and some of the new stuff. They can obviously record your conversations through speakerphones and other things like that, Bluetooth. And the worst case scenario is they could literally take control, physical control over your car through the internet and possibly stage accidents. Basically, WikiLeaks alleges that this technology could be used to conduct what they call nearly undetectable assassinations. Now, look, who would they use this against? Well, as an average American, not you. Not the regular person. You're not going to have to worry about this. It ain't going to be you. Likely, it could be used, in theory, against political opponents, journalists, activists, or basically anybody who causes trouble for the powerful. That's scary stuff. Very scary stuff. And besides, look, It's not like a terrorist. It's not like Jihadi John is going to buy a smart TV, okay, or a smartphone or a smart anything, okay? So why would they need to have this technology if it's not going after the terrorists? That's scary stuff, man. It is. And I know it sounds a little conspiratorial, but again, we're dealing with things that have very little oversight. So again, it's very scary to consider that there are people that have the power to be able to do this. And as we continue to get more and more technologically advanced, everything gets more interconnected. There are certain safety precautions and certain things that could happen with this technology. So again, it's very concerning. Now, look, you might be wondering if you're watching this about WikiLeaks and their credibility. Oh, they're working with Russia, blah blah blah, hacking the DNC. Well, again, there's no proof of any of that, right? But nonetheless, a lot of people are questioning the authenticity of these documents. The CIA, of course, is not going to say anything, whether or not it's their documents. However, you do have at least Edward Snowden out there saying that these documents looked authentic. And look, I look at this and I think there's no reason to believe that they're not authentic, especially since WikiLeaks has had a pretty damn good track record in releasing stuff that, hey, look, turned out to be true. I mean, do you see the DNC at all denying that any of the things hacked or released by WikiLeaks was untrue? Any of the stuff that Edward Snowden had released earlier? Do we have any evidence that that was untrue? The record speaks for itself. It seems pretty obvious, to me at least, in my opinion, that the CIA has tried to create a little mini NSA so they can collect data and information on people and just to be able to target and attack certain devices like your iPhone or your Android phone or your TV. And of course, again, that should concern a lot of people because there is little oversight. WikiLeaks is right. Their reason for releasing this data, and why I say they're correct, is because they say that we need to start having robust policy discussions on the implications of this new technology and how spy agencies are able to utilize this technology and use it against people. And plus, it's not fair to people in Silicon Valley, of all places. Because you remember, these exploits, well, the government finds these exploits and then doesn't tell them about it. These exploits are existing, and it's not only the government that could get into them, it's also other individual hackers that could probably get into them as well. So you're also, that's why Silicon Valley, a lot of these companies, Google, Facebook, etc., are like, holy shit, this is unfair. This is not cool. We have all these vulnerabilities that have been opened up on our devices and, our platforms, and then you're not telling us about this? That's some shit. But basically, the other, of course, very important thing that I like to focus on is privacy rights. And right now, this is seems to be a clear violation, the fact that they can do this stuff into people's privacy rights. There has to be a discussion, and this has to come to light so that we can have a good policy discussion on privacy rights to make sure that they are respected by the very government that is supposed to protect these privacy rights. So, all right. Very illuminating stuff. If you're not paranoid now, you might be. But, all right. So let's switch topics and let's talk about the new ACA replacement bill and how conservative groups hate it. Now, yesterday, House Republicans unveiled the American Health Care Act, the supposed replacement for Obamacare, and both sides of the political spectrum are up in arms. Progressives like me, of course, point out how this is an incredibly draconian piece of legislation and basically an enormous giveaway to very, very wealthy people. Basically, it's only going to benefit the rich and younger people in their 20s. So, okay. Now, conservatives, however, on the other side, think that this bill is not draconian enough. In fact, some of these outside groups are up in arms for this bill not screwing the poor enough. This is according to The Hill. The Club for Growth, a big conservative group, dubbed this proposal Ryan Care and threatened to record names of Republicans who vote for this unless it includes significant changes. Now, what changes would those make? Basically, to make it even more conservative. Because, of course, not fucking over the poor, I mean, you know, they're not obviously fucking over the poor enough in this piece of legislation. And I talked about what's in it yesterday. Now, you also have Heritage Action, Freedom Works, and the Koch brothers backed Americans for Prosperity, all issuing statements that are highly critical of this piece of legislation. In fact, Freedom Works called it Obamacare Light, while the AFP labeled it Obamacare 2.0. In fact, you had AFP President Tim Phillips in an interview with The Hill said, quote, "This is simply not a full repeal of Obamacare. It falls far short of the promises Republicans made to the American people in 4 consecutive federal elections." He also says that the proposed legislation trades one form of government subsidy for another government subsidy and doesn't roll back the mandate of Obamacare. It's a poor first attempt. So basically, they're complaining, well, you didn't get rid of the individual mandate, and you're giving poor people too much money. I mean, sure, it's not a subsidy anymore. It's a tax break. We don't even want to give them that for buying insurance. No. Fuck them. Poor people don't matter. We're the only ones that matter. Have you got the memo yet? Apparently not. And look, on this, if you get rid of the subsidies and you get rid of the tax breaks, as these right-wing groups want to do, well, how the fuck are you supposed to afford insurance? Well, the answer is you're not. Unless you're rich. If you're rich, great. So maybe their answer is just be rich. Oh, God, if I only we would have figured that out before. No, these groups, look, they're not going to be happy until 100% of the benefits of any healthcare legislation go to the wealthiest Americans and poor people are left without insurance. I mean, sure, they'd be fine if poor people could afford insurance on their own, but any federal money or any federal help going to the poor people is unacceptable to them. 100% unacceptable. And this bill, which is wildly conservative to begin with, the most conservative healthcare plan in the world, is still not conservative enough for the Koch brothers and their paid shills in Congress. And I'll actually get to some of them in a few minutes. Now, The Hill notes that assuming all members vote and all Democrats vote no, it would still take 22 House GOP defections to kill this piece of legislation, which has the White House's support. Just 3 Republican votes could sink this legislation in the Senate. Now, of course, on that, you do also have hacks like Joe Manchin on the Democratic side that might actually vote for this bill. So you might not need as many, GOP members if you have these reliably conservative Democrats supporting this piece of legislation. As for the Republicans, I mentioned yesterday Rand Paul is against this piece of legislation because it's not draconian enough, and Mike Lee joins him. They are against this plan already. You also have former House Freedom Caucus Chairman Jim Jordan and conservative representatives Justin Amash and Dave Brott also against this. Now, of course, again, these are the people that believe that this is not conservative enough. However, there is a group of 4 Republican senators that think it's too conservative. This is interesting. You have Rob Portman, Shelley Moore Capito, Cory Gardner, and Lisa Murkowski that are also not backing this piece of legislation, but not because it's too liberal. In fact, they said they oppose it because it gets rid of the Medicaid expansion that has actually helped the poor people in their states. So they actually say, well, we want to keep this because it helps the poor. We don't want to completely fuck over our poor population. So no, we're going to be against this, and I actually want to give them a little bit of credit. And right now, look, we already have the most conservative plan, and it's called Obamacare. This plan is more right wing. The plan that's coming is even more right wing than Obamacare, and is a disaster. And it hasn't even been implemented yet. And it hasn't even been scored by the CBO. You know why? It's because Republicans don't know how to pay for it. All the taxes that went to paying for this have been repealed. Get rid of the taxes. No, we're going to save the rich people all the money. And then we're going to pay for it with what? Fairy dust? That's their plan. So anything, like, if this passes, this is going to be leave a gigantic hole in the budget, while only helping the incredibly rich. And yet, that is not even enough for them. These far right wingers have to kick poor people even harder so they can give that money over to their wealthy donors. And that's what's going on here. Look, I understand the irony of having to defend a right-wing plan against an even more right-wing plan, but this is where we're at here in America. It's insanity. Maybe we should have, I don't know, fought for a public option back when we were trying to pass Obamacare. Maybe that would have actually made a difference. But, of course, couldn't do that because, well, the Democrats, you know my stance on the Democrats, so incredibly weak and spineless on this issue. Incredibly weak. This is crazy, man. You know, we're the only country in the world that doesn't promote universal health care. Why? Well, it's because of the donors. We don't have single payer health care because of the rich paying in money in politics. These wealthy donors, these wealthy corporations, they buy off congressmen to be their shills and make it so that we are unable to actually cover everyone in America, which we can do. We're the richest country in the world. And we have the economy of scale on our side. We can make something like this work. I mean, they never ask about how are we going to pay for another war in the Middle East? How are we going to pay for these giant tax cuts that we're going to give to wealthy people? No, they don't ask how we're going to pay for that. But you want to actually cover people with health insurance? Oh, can't do that. Costs too much. No, it's ridiculous. They don't care about the cost at all. It's all about how can we continue to make a buck off healthcare. And it has to do with the money in politics. We've got to do something about it, man. We've got to get the money out of politics if we want to have any sort of progressive legislation get put in place. Okay. I'm gonna take a quick break here for a second, so I'll be back. Stay right here. It'll be like a minute.
The president and the vice president are all in here. This is the American Health Care Act, and it has their imprimatur, and they are working on this more than anything day by day.
If that's the case, Sean Spicer was asked numerous times yesterday if we call it Trump Care now. If this passes, or when it passes, as you described there, is it by any other name, Trump Care?
Well, it's the American Health Care Act, and I think it's aptly named.
Whoops. I messed up on the sound. I hate when I do that. Thanks for everybody for letting me know. So let's start out with Kellyanne Conway. So now that we're back on track. I hate when I do that. Now, Kellyanne Conway does not think you should be calling the Obamacare replacement bill Trump Care. In an interview with Fox News, Bill Hemmer, he asked Kellyanne if it would be acceptable to call the new legislation by that name. Now, let's take a look at that and her response.
The president and the vice president are all in here. This is the American Health Care Act, and it has their imprimatur, and they are working on this more than anything day by day.
If that's the case, Sean Spicer was asked numerous times yesterday if we call it Trump Care now. If this passes, or when it passes, as you described there, is it by any other name, Trump Care?
Well, it's the American Health Care Act, and I think it's aptly named for this reason. It wants everybody to have access to coverage. That just did not happen under Obamacare. It does away immediately. I'll call it Trump Care if you want to, but I didn't hear President Trump say to any of us, "Hey, I want my name on that." We're happy it's the American Health Care Act. This is serious stuff. This isn't about branding according to someone's name. This is serious business. People in this country feel that health care has been, millions feel like their health care access, quality, and choices have been significantly reduced, and the costs have gone up. Look, many people, the Obamacare people say, oh, we allowed more people to have health care access. If it's unaffordable and you can't afford it, it's worse than not having the choice in the first place. And you know what disappears immediately, Bill? The taxes and the penalties that millions of Americans have been forced to fork over.
Understood.
Because,
and you made that point
people
previously.
were mandated. Yeah, he said it in the joint session.
Well, immediately distraction. Like, oh, yeah, well, I call it Trump Care I'll call it Trump Care if you want. Yes, please do, Kellyanne. Own that shit. I dare you. But it's funny, she goes into immediately blaming Democrats, of course, and saying, hey, man, this is serious business. Yeah. Well, actually, I agree. Healthcare is literally life or death. That's why a lot of people were going to town halls and telling you not to fuck with their healthcare in the first place. In fact, there were people, obviously they're out in the town halls in force saying don't mess with Obamacare. There were also plenty of polls that were saying, hey, don't break the ACA, don't repeal it, fix it. Make it a little bit better. Don't repeal and replace it with something fucking worse. Well, this bill is fucking worse. It gets rid of the subsidies and then replaces them with less generous tax credits. So look, enjoy paying more for insurance unless you're in your 20s, which actually, if you're in your 20s, you actually tend to win in this bill. Unless you're poor. If you're poor, look, this bill hurts many more people than it would help. And it ends up helping being the most generous towards the rich. And that's the problem with this. Everybody else is going to see their insurance prices skyrocket under this bill. Look, it's no wonder nobody wants their name on it. Even Trump. Because normally Trump wants his name on everything. Call it Trump Care. I dare you. Let's do it. Now, I also want to address the hypocrisy of this entire thing. Remember, we had like 7 years of calling the ACA Obamacare, right? Now, suddenly, it's the Republicans. Well, they don't like it when you say Trump Care. They're not interested. Again, if it's so good, if it's such a good plan, why not own it? Because again, it's not a good plan. It's not going to cover everyone. And she even said that, by the way. She said she wants everyone to have access to health insurance coverage. Now, that's very important to point that out. Because access doesn't mean you can actually afford this insurance. I have access to buying a limo doesn't mean I can go up and buy one. Maybe in 20 years of saving up. But health insurance doesn't quite work the same way. You need it Well, it's insurance. You need it. You get it because at some point you anticipate that you're going to need it. So there's the difference, man. And again, this bill, as I pointed out in previous videos, this is not going to lower insurance prices. For most people, you're going to look at paying higher premiums. That's why this is going to be an absolute disaster. Which is why, of course, the moniker of Trump Care fits perfectly. It's got tiny coverage. It's super expensive to keep around. Doesn't really do a whole lot when it's there. And massively helps the 1% while masquerading as something else. Trump Care. Sad. I enjoy this. So, all right. Let's move on. Bernie Sanders. Now, there was a recent Washington Post article titled "The Sorry State of Political Discourse Right Now in 5 Bernie Sanders Tweets." Now, in this article, writer Amber Phillips targeted Bernie Sanders' statements on Trump as an example of what's wrong with our politics today. Oh, this is great. Now, in order to make her case, she pointed out 5 tweets to use as an example of what's wrong with our discourse. Now, I'm going to read them off. Now, one of them is, President Trump cannot continue to lie, lie, lie. It diminishes the office of the president and our standing in the world. He also said Trump said that 3 to 5 million people voted illegally and that his victory was the biggest electoral college win since Ronald Reagan. Both lies. Bernie Sanders also tweeted, Trump said it looked like 1.5 million people at his inauguration. Not even close. And Trump was lying long before he was president when he tried to delegitimize our first black president with the birther conspiracy. The United States will not be respected or taken seriously around the world if Donald Trump continues to shamelessly lie. All of these tweets are perfectly correct, logical, and reasonable because they're right. Now, you might be thinking, what's wrong with that? These are demonstrable and easily provable lies. They're not true. They're not true. And Bernie Sanders is pointing out why they're not true. However, Phillips thinks the act of pointing this out is the problem. She writes, this is the state of our political discourse right now. Political norms like don't accuse the president of the United States of lying without evidence, or don't accuse the former president of the United States of wiretapping your phones without evidence, have been eviscerated. There are new rules right now in politics about what you can, can't, or shouldn't say. But look, on these, they've already been proven to be 100% lies. Of course his inaugurations weren't as big as Ronald Reagan's. We proved that. And they were certainly not nearly as big as Obama's. In 2008, he had 1.8 million people. And then in 2012, his re-election, he had 1 million people at his rally, at his inauguration. Donald Trump didn't have anywhere near that. And again, even George W. Bush beat him on crowds. So, again, easily provable lie by Donald Trump. There are lies, and there are fucking lies. And when they're lies, you got to call them out. Again, with the 3 to 5 million undocumented immigrants, also lies. Trump is lying. He's a serial liar. We can point that out, and we can use examples. What's wrong with this? Well, now, she continues by making a terrible analogy. She says, say you have a job, and within that job, you have a colleague. And say said colleague is, in your mind, a frequent and shameless liar. I wonder how they got that reputation, by the way. You're probably not going to want to give that colleague the time of day. The reverse is also true. If you're asked to work with someone who just told the entire office that you're a liar, well, screw them, right? Again, this is a terrible analogy. For one, you're comparing apples and oranges. Working at an office versus being voted for an office. Politics versus a business. It doesn't make any sense. Again, this is apples and oranges. And again, if somebody is a proven liar and you have facts to back you up, which Bernie Sanders does, and anybody who criticizes Donald Trump on the stuff that he's actually lied about, then, well, what's the problem? You got to call it out. You got to call it out. But see, the fact that whether or not that they're true, that's not her real point. No, her real point, and this is proven in what she writes next. Because Senate Democrats can require 60 votes to approve any piece of legislation, they have leverage over Trump and congressional Republicans, who only have 52 members in the Senate. Trump needs at least a handful of Democrats to help him repeal and replace Obamacare and carry out his plan to restructure the tax code or pass a $1 trillion infrastructure package. Right now, the exact opposite is happening. Democrats are blocking Trump in historic ways. I love this, right? Like stalling committee hearings for key cabinet posts or threatening to filibuster his Supreme Court nominee. Now, wait a minute. Historic ways. Was she here for the last 8 years? Because that was pretty fucking historic with Mitch McConnell. Mitch McConnell blocking pretty much everything. Not only that, they stole a fucking seat, a Supreme Court seat, from President Obama. That's historic. But here's what she's saying. Don't accuse the Republicans or the president of lying, because then they won't work with you. They won't work with you to restructure the tax code or repeal Obamacare. Hey, Democrats, play nice. Play nice. You need to be nice to the Republicans, okay? We need to have decorum. No. I'm sorry, but again, were you here for the last 8 fucking years? When Republicans had historic obstruction on everything the Democrats tried to do? Did you get fucking amnesia? What's wrong with you? Do you pay attention to history? Do you even know what's going on? Amber, what's going on with you? What's wrong with you? Look, okay. She's sitting there and she's worried about decorum and civility in an era where that no longer exists. And it existed as soon as a black man got into the White House. And the Republicans went off the rails. You want us to play nice with people that are trying to rip away health care to millions of people? Or who are against funding women's health? Or who are just there to block everything? Who've taken every single opportunity to block, obstruct, and to be as uncivil as humanly possible to a Democratic president. Insanity. And now it's the Democrats' turn to play nice. It's on the Democrats. Do you know that President Obama bent over backwards to try to deal with the Republicans? In some of these debt deals, John Boehner, I remember him bragging about, I got 99% of what I wanted. That's not how you deal. That's not how you make deals. That's not how you compromise. You come at them with your strongest position, and they come at you with their strongest position, and then you actually negotiate. But no. Democrats, you're going to have to play nice. Did anybody ever tell the Republicans to play nice? No, it's always on the Democrats. No, you got to be nice to the Republicans, okay? It's like telling the bully, the neighborhood bully, or the kid being bullied by the neighborhood bully, you got to be nice to the bully. Maybe then he won't punch you in the face and steal your lunch money. Or maybe he'll do it less. You got to work with him. No, fuck that. Fuck that, dude. Another thing Obama did. He put Social Security on the table. He dropped the public option just to try to appease the Republicans, and it wasn't enough for them. And thankfully, I'm actually glad that it wasn't enough for them, because I believe that we shouldn't cut Social Security whatsoever. So in that way, actually, Republican obstruction actually worked in our benefit in a way. Because again, you had a a Democratic president willing to put those things on the table. Because he's not a progressive. Obama wasn't a progressive, and we know that. No, he's a centrist, center-right Democrat. And a corporatist. But anyway. Now, Bernie Sanders essentially is saying the same thing about decorum. We don't need that at this point. We need to be strong. He writes, what should a United States senator or any citizens do if the president is a liar? Does ignoring this reality benefit the American people? Do we make a bad situation worse by disrespecting the president of the United States? Or do we have an obligation to say that he is a liar to protect America's standing in the world and people's trust in our institutions? And on that, no, we don't ignore the reality. If the president lies, and this always frustrates me with the corporate media, for example, you got to call it out. Democrat or Republican, if somebody lies, you've got to call it out. Americans deserve the truth, not bullshit. And that is, of course, one of my biggest frustrations with corporate media, false equivalence. I mean, you know, Democrats over here, Republican over here, lying his ass off. And these people, people that are paid millions and millions of dollars anyway to be on TV, say, I don't know. It's, I mean, Republicans say that, Democrats say this. You decide. No, you don't get to decide on the truth. You just don't. Now, Sanders also writes that one of my greatest concerns is that there undoubtedly will be major crises facing the United States and the global community during Donald Trump's tenure as president. If Trump lies over and over again, what kind of credibility will he or the United States have when we need to bring countries around the world together to respond to those crises? I find it interesting that Ms. Phillips did not take issue with my facts. Her complaint appears to be that it is improper for a United States senator to state the obvious. And that is the fucking problem right there. This is all about being proper and civil and following Washington etiquette. Oh, I do declare, the honorable gentleman from New York, we shall not impugn his integrity. Bullshit. If somebody lies, you've got to call it out. Not only as a member of the media, but as a member of the government, you have to challenge those who play fast and loose with the truth. If the media and political leaders, he writes, fail to call lies what they are, then are they then guilty of misleading the public? And to that, I say absolutely yes. They are at fault for misleading the public if they don't call out lies. And it's amazing we have to have this conversation. But there are people obviously out there that still don't get it. Remember, Amanda Phillips writes for the Washington Post. Forget the decorum. That is not more important than the truth. And if you want to keep playing that Washington game where calling out lies is considered so incredibly rude that we must not appear in the name of the senators or our president, well then, no. Nobody's going to listen to you because you have lost credibility. You have lost credibility. How dare you for letting people get away with these falsehoods and creating this false equivalence? The rise of Trump is partly your fault. Yes, of course, there was right-wing media. They go out there and they lie and lie and lie. And the corporate media with the false equivalence don't challenge that. They don't challenge that. People in government, they don't challenge that. And so, look, when the people sit and they see these politicians constantly lie and lie and lie and not get challenged by the very institutions that are supposed to hold them accountable, they lose trust in those institutions as well as trust in those politicians. And that allows somebody like Donald Trump to go in there and say, I'm not a politician. I'm not part of the establishment. Listen to me. I can save you from this. To be able to get in and to be able to swindle people. Because, again, he is a snake oil salesman saying what, like he noticed, yeah, all the politicians and everybody lies to us. What if I run on that? I'm going to get a lot of votes. And you know what? He did. And look, not only that, but you had, for years, decades, right-wingers creating their own media bubble where facts didn't exist. And again, they go on corporate media and they don't get challenged. False equivalence. Democrats say this, Republicans say that. No, it's disgusting. This is what decorum gets us. This is what being nice gets us. It's what helped us get into this mess in the first place. It ain't going to get us out. And you wonder why the corporate media establishment is dying. It's because they're afraid of being considered rude and losing access for doing what they're supposed to do, and that is to tell the truth. Both the media and the politicians need to call lies what they are. Okay. I get a little frustrated sometimes. Okay. We got one more story for you guys. And that's on the state of sex in America. So we're going to have a little bit of fun to, or well, it may be a little disastrous. Next story to round out the rest of the day. So, okay. Americans are now having less sex than what they had before. According to a recent study, American adults are having less sex than they did a quarter of a century ago. Now, this paper was published in the journal Archives of Sexual Behavior. And what it did is that it showed a drop across gender, race, region, education level, and work status. So basically showed a drop of sexual activity among those different groups. Now, they looked at data between the years of 1989 to 2014 from the General Social Survey. Now, the study found that American adults have sex 7 to 9 fewer times per year than they did back in the 1990s. Back then, Americans on average had sex 60 to 62 times a year. However, in the early 2000s, that frequency began to slip, and by 2014, it had declined to less than 53 times a year. Now, interesting, if you had asked me back in the 2000s, I'd have been like, 53 times a year? That sounds fucking awesome! But of course, in this study, it's like, 59 times a year? Ooh, 53? Ooh, hey, you suck. You're not doing very well, dude. All right, well. Now, when they looked at only married people, it happened to even be more of a disaster than it was for single people. It actually dropped from around 73 times a year in 1990 to around 55 in 2014. Bringing the frequency of sexual activity below that of people who had never been married. People in that group who have never been married have sex an average of 59 times a year. Wow. Now, they also point out that some of these numbers are because some Americans are not becoming pairs. They're not coupling up. Now, they said that in the same time period, Americans overall became less coupled. In 1986, 66% of American adults were living with a partner. By 2014, only 59% were, according to GSS data. People who are not in couples, including those who have been married in the past, tend to have sex half as frequently as people who are. So, very interesting on this data. Now, this report does not list the explicit causes for this decline. It basically just looked at the decline, and the factors are anybody's guess. And I've got a few myself. Now, they do cite possible factors include the increased access to entertainment and social media, a decline in happiness among people aged 30 or over, higher incidences of depression, and use of antidepressants associated with sexual dysfunction. Now, those are some of the reasons they laid out for possibilities, but I think they miss a couple. I mean, we are dealing with the millennial age group, right? You know, that's people around 30. I'm 32. I'm in the millennials, millennial generation, and we grew up during the height of the Great Recession. Now, people like me, we've got a lot of student loan debt, low-paying jobs, and different stressors related to those things. These people aren't coupling up or getting married. And, of course, because of that, they're not having as much sex. Why? Because I don't think they can afford to. I mean, think about it. If you're single and you're working 2 jobs to pay the rent and your student loans, to try and pay your student loans off at minimum wage job, 2 minimum wage jobs, you're not exactly in a good position to head out to the bar to try to get laid. Okay? I mean, that's... Or what if you're married, right? you're married and both of you maybe have a lot of debt, and both of you two income household, which, by the way, student loan debt is more than $1 trillion at this point. You're not going to have a lot of time to go to the sheets. Now, you also had another study that pointed out how millennials need to feel they need to be work martyrs. Now, what does that mean? It basically means that they're putting in all these extra hours at work. They're not taking vacation time. They're not taking time off. They're not taking sick time. So what they're doing is they're constantly working to try to make themselves seem like they're invaluable to the company. When you're putting on all that work, all those extra hours, you're not having as much sex, whether or not you're married. So there's that. I really think that a lot of this has to do with the lack of economic opportunity, as well as the crushing debt for millennials and other people. Now, again, when it comes to technology, now they say, oh, well, technology, of course, will stop you from having sex, right? It's actually a lot easier with technology to hook up and have sex. And despite that, Americans overall are still having less sex. It's because we're overworked. And look, Japan has the same problem, right? They're also overworked. They're not having sex as much. They're not hooking up. They're not getting married. They're not having families. Okay. Now, Jean M. Twang, the study's lead author who teaches psychology at San Diego State University and wrote a book, Generation Me, about millennials, asked this question. She says, are millennials less happy and thus having less sex? Or are they having less sex and therefore less happy? It's probably some of both, she answers. We know that sexual frequency is linked to marital satisfaction, so overall, if you have fewer people having sex, you could have people who are less happy and less satisfied with those relationships. Now, a major distractor to American sex lives, according to Pepper Schwartz, a sociology professor at the University of Washington, is the rising necessity of the two-income family. She says, quote, I would say the number one cause for a lack of sex is fatigue. You have many more women and men working to create two-income families to stay middle class or above. People's minds are occupied with things other than the physical connection, and that has increased in modern life, and especially from the 80s and 90s and onward. Now, the study also points out that the decline in sexual activity was sharpest among people in their 50s. That makes sense, right? Because when you get older, your sex drive declines, and that's sort of a natural thing. Now, it also declined around people with a college degree, people with children. Again, that makes a lot of sense. People in the South, very, very interesting. And something that you might not realize, it actually declined among people who don't watch porn. Now, a lot of you might be thinking, well, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. I thought if you watched porn, you would be having less sex. Not necessarily, according to this study. In fact, it points out that people who watch porn, people who had watched a porn movie in the last year, had a decline that was less pronounced than those who don't watch porn. Fascinating. In fact, younger people, men, non-whites, people with children under 6, people in the West, and those who had watched porn all saw a less of a decrease in sexual activity. Fascinating. And now they also said that as more people put off parenthood until later, the combination of middle age and child rearing may create a perfect storm of sexual infrequency. And working parents who spend less time with their children during the week tend to make up for it on the weekends, eating into time that would normally go towards couples. Now, let's see. Finally, it says, what you need for sex life is energy, focus, and time, and the right mood. If you've just run a marathon, is the first thing I want to do have sex? Probably not. I second that. So again, look, I think it has to do with people being overworked, having more responsibility, and, less income, all that stuff, more stress. I mean, unsurprisingly, they have less sex. It makes sense. And look, I think, and there was a story out probably last week, 2 weeks ago, where Sweden is actually giving people an hour off work to go have sex with their significant other. They're advancing this bill. Now, here in America, we're like, whoa, holy shit, that's crazy. You're going to pay people to fuck? What's wrong with you? But actually, it makes a lot of sense when you look at these numbers. These people don't have time to connect with their partners anymore. They don't have time to appreciate and enjoy being with someone else, being with their partner, being with their wife or girlfriend, etc. Because you have all of these stressors, all of this work, all of this debt, and not a lot of time and not a lot of energy. So it actually makes perfect sense why Sweden actually did this. And you got to think, maybe these Swedes, maybe they're onto something. Maybe. All right. Anyway, that's it. That's all I got for you guys today. I want to thank you for going around the nation with me today. I also want to thank you guys for sharing and liking the videos. If you haven't already, please throw me a sub. Just click the subscription box below if you could. Definitely appreciate that, especially if you like the stuff that I'm doing, that I'm talking about. And of course, you can always send in suggestions on what you'd also like to see me cover. You can tweet me at TYTNation, or you can post on my Facebook page. That's TYTNation, of course. Again, big thanks to the patrons who help support the show, keeping us independent and corporate sponsored free. Thank you so much for that. Thank you, everyone at home. We might be back, I'm not sure if we'll be here tomorrow, so I'll keep you updated on that. Or Friday. So I'm not sure what's going on the next couple of days, so I'll keep you posted. But anyway, again, thank you so much. We love you guys. We'll see you later on. And remember, change begins with you. Good night, TYT Nation.